always think it's very daring to ask a Quaker to speak, because we just might stand up here for our full 10 minutes and not say anything. But generally, the lawyer gets the better of me. And I'll start out by saying that an additional part of my introduction should be that I'm a conscientious objector to war. Now, some of you might object to my saying that because I was never in the United States military. I did grow up in a cannon fodder neighborhood. I did see many of my friends die in the military. But no, I never was a member of the military. But I do not believe that it is the government's job to define who I am. So I define myself as a conscientious objector to war. Now, make no mistake, I am not a pacifist, in spite of being a Quaker, as I often mention to my son when he, as a teenager, wanted to avoid the consequences of some of his less reasoned actions. I would say, I'm not a pacifist, I'm a conscientious objector to war. Conscientious objection to war has been around as long as war has been. It has been recognized by all faith traditions that I have been able to find so far, in some manner or another. The Torah, for example, talks about when you gather an army together for a war, that men of scruples should be allowed to go home. That if their heart is tender and they cannot kill, they should be allowed to go home. The early Christian saints, a huge number of them. I once got my hands on one of those saint books that's got, 5,000 names of saints in it. And if you look at the first, 300, they mostly were Roman soldiers who, when they converted to Christianity, concluded that they would only take up the weapons of God, which were not earthly weapons. And for that, they were killed and sainted. America was a place where many conscientious objectors to war came, seeking freedom. Quakers, Mennonites, Brethren, Moravians, which I'm guessing most of you haven't heard of, Christadelphians, which I think probably only 3 people here know what is besides me. Lots of churches that rejected it. Mostly people take you back to the American Revolution on that. But I can tell you that in the French-Indian Wars, if you can remember that far back in your history lessons, which was before the American Revolutions, which is when George Washington first learned to be a soldier, was the first time he ran into conscientious objectors to war. The Quaker, Mennonites, and Brethren who had come here seeking that freedom didn't change their mind just because they were on another place and they were being attacked. They still stood firm, adopting the very thing that was suggested that all of our soldiers have in their hearts, which is obeying their government up until that point that God told them not to. And for many of my friends of those churches, which I tend to not call the peace churches because it lets out so many others like the Jehovah's Witness and the Seventh-day Adventists, but the usual suspects, many of those people are people who, when rendering unto God or unto Caesar, have decided to give God the benefit of the doubt. So how did such a fervent, conscientious objector such as I end up at a meeting about selective objection? I tell you, not only do I think war is wrong and a sin, I think it's stupid and ineffective. I'm quite clear about this, and I'll let you in on a secret. This is in spite of the fact that my brother-in-law, Tom Ricks, is noted for his books, Fiasco, and what's his current one? I've forgotten, The Gamble, which are very pro-military. I'm clear. So how did I end up here? Because we so often get bogged down into the definition that the government has given us for conscientious objection, that it means only someone such as the government has decided in their wisdom, who has jumped through those hoops like those young men who were up here before and the young men on the film, many of whom the center was there for. And the young men during World War II who refused to fight, including the very, very lonely, if you can imagine it, 10 Mormon conscientious objectors. It has never been just about certain churches and certain beliefs. It has always been broader than that. It has always been open to more than a few. But the government doesn't want you to know that. It's a secret. The government doesn't want you to understand that not only is everyone in this room, in spite of the ones who say they are not conscientious objectors to war, are. Because they object to some war, a war, and that's a conscientious objection to war. Not all wars, but war. And so not only are we all conscientious objectors, but everyone in this huge city are conscientious objectors to war. Everyone in this nation, up to and including the former presidents. And you know who I'm talking about. Because everyone has had some war that they thought was wrong. We are all conscientious objectors to war. From the war tax resistors whose scruples are so great that they cannot even bear to pay the taxes that pay for the war, all the way over to the men and women in the appeal for redress, who you may not remember, but they went on 60 Minutes, career military, wanting to stay in the military. When they were ordered to Iraq, they would go, and they did go. But they objected to the war in Iraq and told their congressional members so. All of those people are conscientious objectors. All of those people are people who object to the war. And all of those people's consciences should be respected by the government, rather than institutionalizing the beliefs of a small, and Lord knows, the Quaker Mennonite Brethren, Seventh-day Adventists, even when you throw in all the other churches, it is a small group of people who object to all wars. It should not be a codification of Quaker Mennonite Brethren theology, as it is now. It should be the beliefs of all people in this country that is respected, that is honored, so that we at the center, who have been there for the appeal for the redress people, who have been there for the war tax resistors, who have been there for Josh and Aiden and Kevin and people you've never heard of, who are still there for Mimi, who's going through her 3rd year in the military, waiting for her CO application. We've been there for all of them. But we also want to be there for the men and women who cannot say, I object to all wars, but I object to this one. I object to this one, and my heart and my God and my conscience tells me to say no. And they should have that right. It should be honored in a land where people claim they fight for the freedom of conscience.